The bank lobby gleamed with marble floors and gold-trimmed counters, the air heavy with the scent of polished wood and coffee. The soft hum of conversation mixed with the clicking of keyboards and the shuffle of papers. Daniel Price, a well-dressed black businessman in his late 30s, stepped forward in line, holding a thick envelope filled with cash. He had spent the morning closing a deal, a profitable one, and now came to make a simple deposit. When it was his turn, he approached the counter with a polite smile. "Good afternoon," he said, placing the envelope on the counter. "I'd like to deposit this into my business account, please." The bank clerk, a white man in his 40s with slicked back hair and an air of superiority, looked him up and down before smirking. "Are you sure this is yours?" he said slowly, tapping the envelope with a pen. Daniel's smile faded slightly, though he kept his composure. "Yes. It's from a transaction earlier today. I can provide my account details." The clerk chuckled under his breath and began spreading the bills across the counter, counting them one by one, not out of necessity, but to make a point. "Lot of cash," he said mockingly. "We don't usually handle this kind of walk-in money. Next time, maybe bring a check, or come with your boss." A few people in line turned to glance, curious. Someone chuckled quietly. Daniel's face remained calm, but his chest tightened. Every instinct screamed to speak up, to defend himself, but he swallowed the anger and forced a steady tone. "My business. My account. My deposit," he said evenly. "Please process it." The clerk raised an eyebrow but continued slowly, clearly enjoying his small display of power. When the transaction was finally complete, he slid the receipt across the counter. "There you go," he said with a smirk. "Try not to bring loose cash next time. It looks unprofessional." Daniel took the receipt, meeting the clerk's eyes for a moment, not with rage, but with quiet strength. "Don't worry," he said softly. "Next time, things will be different." As he walked out of the bank, sunlight poured through the glass doors, glinting off the city skyline. The laughter behind him faded, but the sting of humiliation stayed. What the clerk didn't know, what no one in that lobby knew, was that Daniel Price never forgot moments like this. And when the opportunity came, he wouldn't just walk back through those doors. He would own them. The cool air outside the bank hit Daniel's face as he stepped onto the sidewalk. The laughter from the lobby still echoed faintly behind him. For a long moment, he stood still, staring at the reflection of the bank's tall glass windows. His own face looked back at him, calm on the surface, but beneath that calmness burned quiet fury. He adjusted his tie, took a deep breath, and whispered to himself, "Don't let them decide who you are." Daniel walked to his car, his movements deliberate, his mind already shifting gears from emotion to strategy. The clerk's condescending smirk replayed in his mind, the kind of smile that assumed superiority without reason. But Daniel had seen that look before. He'd grown up with it, faced it in boardrooms, and now it had followed him into a bank he had helped fund through his own business ventures. He drove home in silence, the city skyline glowing through the windshield. Every light, every passing building reminded him of his progress, the years of late nights, of risk and perseverance that had built his company from nothing. Back in his home office, Daniel powered on his laptop. The glow of the screen illuminated frames, certificates and photos, his first real estate property, his first storefront, the ribbon cutting of his investment firm. He opened his financial portfolio, scrolling through the numbers. His company was stronger than ever, its revenue climbing steadily. A few strategic acquisitions, and he could expand into the financial sector, the very world that had just mocked him. He smiled faintly, the sting of humiliation now transforming into purpose. "They laughed when I deposited money," he thought. "Let's see how they react when I deposit ownership papers." He pulled out a notepad and began outlining his next steps: market evaluations, potential partners, banks struggling for liquidity, opportunities hidden behind arrogance. The sound of his pen scratching across the paper was steady, deliberate, almost rhythmic. "Next time," he whispered, looking back toward the faint outline of the bank through his window, "I won't be standing in line. I'll be signing the checks." Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, but Daniel smiled. It wasn't a storm he feared, it was one he was ready to bring. For the next several weeks, Daniel worked with quiet intensity. His mornings began before sunrise, his nights stretched deep past midnight. The humiliation from that day in the bank was no longer a wound, it was fuel. Every hour, every calculation, every meeting pushed him closer to his goal. His office became a command center. Charts and documents covered the walls, market data, acquisition forecasts, lists of regional banks, and financial institutions struggling under poor management. A steaming mug of coffee sat beside his laptop, untouched, as he studied spreadsheets glowing on the screen. He wasn't looking for revenge, he was looking for opportunity. Through his company, Price Capital Holdings, Daniel began discreetly buying shares in smaller banks. He met with financial advisors and attorneys, explaining his vision in calm, measured tones. "I don't want to dismantle them," he said. "I want to rebuild them, responsibly. Fairly. I want to run banks that treat people with respect, not arrogance." His lawyers exchanged glances, impressed by his precision and conviction. One of them, a seasoned banker, smiled. "You are not just buying banks, Mr. Price. You're changing the game." Daniel nodded, eyes focused. "I've been on the wrong side of that counter," he said quietly. "I know what it feels like to be dismissed. I won't run a business like that." Every transaction was strategic. He bought slowly, methodically, until his company's influence grew. And when a struggling banking group came up for sale, Daniel recognized one of its assets immediately, the very bank where he'd been humiliated. He paused for a long time, staring at the listing. A small smile crept across his face. "Perfect," he murmured. That evening, as rain pattered against his office window, Daniel signed the first set of acquisition papers. The glow from the city lights reflected in his eyes as he whispered to himself, "They laughed when I deposited money. Let's see how they react when I deposit ownership papers." The pen glided across the contract with steady confidence. Every stroke was an act of transformation, a man turning indignity into empowerment, prejudice into power. The next time Daniel Price walked through those glass doors, it would not be as a customer. It would be as the man who owned everything inside. The morning sun glinted off the glass towers of downtown. The same city that had once watched Daniel Price walk away in silence now reflected his success in every mirrored window. He stepped out of a black car, crisp suit perfectly tailored, confidence in every step. Ahead stood the bank, the same one where he'd been laughed at, belittled, and dismissed. Its gold-lettered logo shimmered above the doors, but to Daniel, it no longer represented authority. It represented opportunity completed. Inside, the lobby looked just as he remembered: marble floors, polished counters, the faint aroma of coffee and paperwork. The same bank clerk, the one who had humiliated him, was standing behind the counter, chatting idly with a coworker. Daniel approached the front desk calmly, folder in hand. His voice was even, professional. "Good morning. I have a meeting with the branch manager," he said. The clerk looked up, then frowned, clearly not recognizing him at first. "Do you have an appointment?" Daniel gave a small smile. "Yes. I believe you'll find it's quite an important one." Moments later, the manager, a middle-aged woman in a navy suit, hurried out of her office. Her expression changed the instant she saw Daniel. "Mr. Price. Welcome. We've been expecting you," she said warmly. The clerk blinked, confused. "Mr. Price?" The manager gestured toward the conference room. "Please, this way. The acquisition team is ready." As Daniel walked past the counter, he felt the eyes of the entire staff follow him. The same clerk stood frozen, pen halfway to the paper, his smirk now replaced with uncertainty. In the conference room, papers were neatly stacked, awaiting signatures. Bank attorneys, advisors, and representatives sat around the long table. The atmosphere was formal, but Daniel exuded calm power. He opened the folder, reviewing the final page of the contract. With a smooth, deliberate motion, he picked up the pen and signed his name, Daniel Price, chairman and owner. The manager extended her hand, smiling proudly. "Congratulations, Mr. Price. The acquisition is complete. The bank is officially under your ownership." A faint smile touched Daniel's lips as he replied, "Thank you. It's a pleasure to finally do business here, under different terms." Outside the conference room, the clerk caught sight of Daniel shaking hands with the executives. His face drained of color as realization struck: the man he'd mocked was now the owner of the entire bank. Daniel stepped into the lobby, straightening his jacket, his gaze calm and composed. He looked at the clerk, not with anger, but with quiet dignity, then walked past him toward the exit. The doors opened automatically before him this time. No one stopped him. No one laughed. He had entered as a customer once. He was leaving as the owner. The morning had started like any other for Richard, the bank clerk who once mocked Daniel. He sipped his coffee, joked with a coworker, and sorted through deposit slips with casual disinterest. But the moment Daniel Price walked through those glass doors earlier, something inside him had shifted, a faint feeling of recognition, buried under arrogance. Now, as Daniel's name echoed down the hallway from the conference room, Richard's hands began to tremble. "Did she just say Mr. Price?" whispered one of the tellers. "Yeah," another replied. "He's the one buying the bank." The words hit him like a punch to the chest. Richard looked up just in time to see Daniel emerging from the conference room, flanked by the branch manager and a team of executives. Their conversation was polite, professional. Daniel's calm authority radiated through every gesture. "Congratulations again, Mr. Price," said one of the lawyers, handing him a folder. "You've finalized ownership of this entire institution. The transition team will report directly to you starting tomorrow." Daniel nodded. "Thank you. I'll make sure this branch, and every other one, reflects the values we stand for." As they shook hands, the entire staff stared silently from their stations. The once bustling lobby had gone completely still. Phones rang unanswered. Customers glanced around, sensing something monumental had just happened. Richard stood frozen behind the counter, his earlier smirk replaced by disbelief. His face paled as Daniel's gaze met his. For a heartbeat, the two men stared at each other, one remembering humiliation, the other drowning in regret. Daniel walked toward him, his expression calm, unreadable. "Good morning," Daniel said evenly. "I hope you're finding the transition smooth so far." Richard swallowed hard, unable to respond. His voice cracked as he tried to speak. "And Mr. Price, I didn't realize." Daniel raised a hand slightly, stopping him. "It's all right. You don't need to explain. Let's just say things have changed." He paused, eyes steady. "In my bank, everyone will be treated with the respect they deserve, customers and employees." The words landed with quiet authority, carrying the weight of both forgiveness and power. Then Daniel smiled faintly and turned to the manager. "I'll be back tomorrow to meet the full team. We have new standards to set." As he walked toward the exit, the employees parted instinctively to make way for him. The marble floor reflected his stride, steady, confident, unstoppable. Behind him, Richard stood in silence, face drained of color. The laughter, the arrogance, the superiority, all of it dissolved in that moment. He had mocked a man for bringing money. Now that same man owned his job, his building, and his future. The next morning, the bank buzzed with nervous anticipation. Word had spread overnight. Daniel Price, the man who had once been humiliated at the counter, was now the official owner. Every employee arrived early, straightened their uniforms, and spoke in hushed tones. The atmosphere was heavy with a mix of curiosity, guilt, and awe. At precisely 9 a.m., the glass doors opened, and Daniel stepped inside. He wore a dark tailored suit, his posture confident but approachable. The branch manager and senior staff hurried to greet him, but Daniel simply smiled and said, "Please, let's all gather in the conference room. I'd like to speak with the team." Within minutes, every employee, from tellers to managers, filled the room. Even Richard, the embarrassed clerk, sat quietly in the back, his hands clasped tightly. The room fell silent as Daniel stood at the head of the table, his expression calm but firm. "Thank you all for being here," he began. His voice was smooth, deliberate, commanding respect without demanding it. "As you've all heard, Price Financial Group has officially acquired this bank. That means things will change, not in structure alone, but in spirit." He paused, scanning the room. "I was once a customer here. I came in to make a deposit. I was met with laughter, doubt, and judgment. Not because of what I said or what I did, but because of who I am." A murmur rippled through the room. Some employees shifted uncomfortably. Richard stared down at the table, his face pale. Daniel continued, his tone steady but filled with conviction. "That experience stayed with me. Not because it hurt my pride, but because it showed me how easily dignity can be taken from someone, by words, by tone, by a simple glance." He looked around the room, his gaze landing briefly on Richard before softening. "But that ends today. From now on, this bank will operate on a single principle: respect. Respect for every customer who walks through our doors, no matter their skin color, their clothes, or the size of their account. Respect for every employee, no matter their position." The room was utterly silent now. Even the hum of the air conditioner seemed to fade. We're going to build a new kind of bank, one that values integrity over image, empathy over ego. This isn't just business for me, he said quietly. It's personal. Then he smiled, warm and genuine. I believe in second chances. That's why every one of you still has a place here, if you're willing to uphold these values. If you are, then together, we'll make this branch a model of fairness and success. The employees exchanged glances. One by one, they nodded. The tension in the room began to ease, replaced by something new, respect. Even Richard raised his head, meeting Daniel's eyes with gratitude and remorse. As the meeting ended, Daniel shook hands with several staff members. When he reached the door, he paused and looked back. This bank doesn't just have a new owner, he said. It has a new purpose. The applause started quietly, then grew stronger, not forced, but genuine. For the first time, everyone in that building felt they were part of something bigger than business. A few months later, the once ordinary bank had transformed. The marble floors gleamed brighter, the walls were repainted in deep navy and gold, and a new sign above the entrance now read, Price Financial Group, Banking with Integrity. The grand reopening drew a crowd. Local business owners, reporters, and longtime clients gathered on the sidewalk outside. Cameras flashed as Daniel Price stood at the entrance, flanked by smiling employees. Even the air felt different, lighter, charged with hope and purpose. The mayor gave a short speech about entrepreneurship and community, then gestured toward Daniel. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the man whose vision and leadership are redefining how business should be done, Mr. Daniel Price. Applause rippled through the crowd as Daniel stepped up to the microphone. He looked over the audience, at the faces of customers, employees, and even at the back, where Richard, the former clerk, stood quietly, watching with humility and respect. Thank you, Daniel began, his voice steady, carrying warmth and gravity. A few months ago, I stood in this very building under very different circumstances. I walked in as a customer, and I left feeling small, not because I was poor, but because someone made me feel like I didn't belong. The crowd listened in silence. That day could have broken me, he continued. But instead, it reminded me of who I wanted to be. I decided that when I came back, and I knew I wouldn't come for revenge. I'd come to build something better. He turned slightly, gesturing toward the staff behind him. This bank isn't just about money. It's about trust. It's about seeing value in every person who walks through that door. From now on, every handshake here will mean something. Every customer will be treated as an equal. The applause grew louder, not the polite clapping of formality, but the sound of genuine admiration. Daniel smiled, his eyes shining. This isn't just my victory, he said softly. It's a reminder, to anyone who's ever been laughed at, ignored, or doubted, that your worth isn't defined by someone else's perception. It's defined by how you choose to rise. He reached for the ribbon stretched across the doors. With a single, decisive motion, he cut it. The crowd erupted in cheers. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, and the new Price Financial Group officially opened its doors. As the crowd dispersed, Richard quietly approached Daniel. Mr. Price, he said, his voice low. I just wanted to thank you for giving me a second chance. Daniel looked at him, smiling kindly. Everyone deserves one, he replied. Just make the most of it. Then he turned toward the gleaming sign above the entrance, sunlight catching the gold lettering. For a moment, he saw his reflection there, not the man who had once been humiliated, but the man who had built something greater out of it. He stepped inside, greeted by warm smiles and respectful nods. This time, no one looked down on him. He had turned pain into purpose. And the bank that once rejected him now bore his name.